And then at that time, we'll welcome you over. You can greet Gigi over at the signing table rather than coming up here. And then she'll be happy to sign your books. We have a little line that can line up there by the stanchions. And also at that time, the refreshments will be open and available. So we encourage you to stay and mingle and talk. If you've not already purchased the books, they are at every register up front. They come in hardcover and softback. And I think that's about it. So without further ado, Book Review is very pleased to welcome Gigi Michaels and her first novel, her first book, No Place Called Home. Thank you.
I want to just say that this is an amazing evening. I look around, and this is better than a bar mitzvah, and I don't have to pay for the band. Everyone in this room has had an impact on my life. With some, I go back over 40 years. Others are newer friends. But each and every person in this room is a link to my past and my present. Let me begin by saying that I was an only child, an only grandchild, an only niece. And when I realized a few years ago that I was the only person left that could keep these memories alive, I knew that I had to tell this story. What drove me the most to write this book was my children and my grandchildren. This is their heritage. I want them to be proud of their roots and to understand the amazing circumstances that their great-grandparents endured, and their strength and determination and their love of family that carried them. My parents grew up in two different cities and enjoyed vastly different lifestyles. They lived in a comfortable, secure environment, never suspecting that the historical tyranny of the Hitler era would turn their world upside down. Ernst, my father, lived the life of a religious Jew in a lovely small Austrian city called Eisenstadt. In the late 1930s, my father was beaten and forced by the Nazis to leave his home, to leave his family, or face a concentration camp. He took this warning seriously. A few days later, he packed a small bag, sewed some money into the soles of his shoes, and fled. During this time, Hugo, his brother, had been picked up by the SS and shipped to Dachau concentration camp. Luckily, this was before the Nazis' final solution. The family was devastated, but Emily, the matriarch, marched into Nazi headquarters, desperate to save her son's life. She never gave up, and finally found a way to get Hugo out of Dachau by purchasing tickets to the only open door available, Shanghai, China. Meanwhile, Margaret, my mother, came from a well-off Viennese family and enjoyed the life of the more privileged. Life seemed good until it wasn't. On November 9th, 1938, the Nazis orchestrated a pogrom they called Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass. They stormed the streets, blowing up and burning nearly every synagogue and prayer house in Vienna, plundering thousands of Jewish shops and forcing Jews from their homes and their apartments. The streets were ablaze from the fires, and glass covered every step as Margaret and Rudolph, my grandfather, carefully went to estimate the damage to their store. Luckily, there was little. But as they turned to leave their store, SS troopers marched in and ordered everyone into the back, where the Nazi officers made them hand over the keys to their homes and their businesses. The troopers left them with a stern warning that they would be back to cart them off to the death camps. Margaret and her family, without a home and fearing for their lives, were forced into hiding while desperately seeking an escape. As the doors to Jewish migration from Nazi-occupied Europe slammed shut, Shanghai, China became an increasingly viable option for Jews desperate to escape. Their open-door policy did not require a visa and granted asylum to Jews fleeing Europe. Margaret, who had been sponsored by a family in London, escaped to work as a domestic until she obtained passage to Shanghai, where she could join her family. On the long ocean voyage, she met and fell in love with Ernst, who boarded the ship in Genoa, Italy. Against seemingly insurmountable odds, they married in Shanghai and had a child while living in the poorest section of the city. Life was very hard for us. To make matters more difficult, Shanghai was now occupied by the Japanese. Food was scarce, and sanitary conditions very poor, and death and disease spread throughout the desperate population. The Japanese were shocked by Hitler's plan to annihilate an entire population of brilliant Jews. There were reports that the Japanese secretly attempted to buy Jewish scientists from Nazi Germany. The Japanese felt that Hitler's conviction to racial purity was a compromise to world interests. It made no sense to the Japanese, who realized the possibilities and were willing to transport Jews for their benefit. They knew that they could gain brilliant scientists and economists and highly talented immigrants that would strengthen Japan's economy and offer them moral superiority. This was the Fugu plan, but this plan was never implemented, and the Japanese control of Shanghai continued as before. When on December 8, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, word spread quickly throughout the Jewish community in Shanghai. Everyone had the same fears. We're in the middle of a Japanese and Chinese conflict. Now the Americans are involved, and they will retaliate. The question now was, what are the Japanese going to do with us here? After Pearl Harbor, the war dynamics changed. The Americans and their allies were on one side, and Japan was more anxious to line up with the Germans. Now the Nazis decided to implement their final solution and to expand the cleansing process to places that the Jews had turned to for refuge. The Shanghai papers revealed the upcoming discussion between the Germans and the Japanese, and plans for a meeting with top Nazi officials were scheduled. The Germans proposed a way to rid Shanghai of all the Jews that had escaped from Europe because of the war. The Germans were prepared to bring large vessels into the China seas and to force the Jews out onto the ships. Once there, they would leave them to starve to death and dump the bodies in the sea. When the Japanese left the meeting, the chief counsel was quoted as saying, "I was revolted by the German plan. They are barbarians." But after the meeting, the Japanese, in order to placate the Germans, took strong measures against the Jews and enacted a new proclamation forcing all of almost 25,000 Jewish immigrants into a 2-mile area called Huntington. There the housing was non-existent. We finally found a room which we had to share with a poor Chinese family with just a curtain separating their side of the room from ours. Japanese military control became oppressive. Japanese soldiers would enter our lanes, pound on doors, and break them down just to terrorize the Jews. The Japanese assigned the notorious Mr. Goya, who called himself the King of the Jews, to guard the Jews in Huntington. Goya was a madman who took pleasure out of humiliating and harassing Jews every day, as they had to stand on long lines, begging him to get a temporary pass to leave the ghetto. It was pure torture to wait in line in the broiling sun for hours. My aunt, who had a job outside of the ghetto, had to stand on those lines, sometimes for a whole day, and then to take the abuse from Goya. At his whim, Goya would slap the face of a hapless applicant and then refuse to give out a pass. Life was hard. We lived with very little to eat, poor sanitary conditions, and major health problems. But yet, we were grateful to be alive. When the war in Europe finally came to an end, the question remained, where can we go now? Is there no place we can call home? This story is all factual. Every character is real. Every event happened. People often say to me, you were such a young child. How could you remember everything? From the time I was born, my life was a constant drama. Everything that I experienced left a memory. Every scene painted a picture that I can still see. I didn't grow up with toys, games, or even playmates. I was always surrounded by my family, by adults, and they included me in every aspect of our lives. They didn't baby me. They taught me to accept, to respect, and to understand the circumstances under which we have to live. I always say that I was spoiled. I was spoiled, not with material things. I had nothing, but I was spoiled with love and with family support. Today, there are those that claim the Holocaust never occurred. They want to erase it from our history books. We must learn from the past and say never again. I feel that this is an important story for young people today. I plan to take this message into high schools and community centers with the hope that it will bring greater awareness of a time in our history that must not be forgotten. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer. Yes.
After the war, how did you get out of China and where did you go?
It's all in the book. We did travel around quite a bit.
Did you know anyone that came from Shanghai and went to Australia after the war?
Many people did, yes. They had to be sponsored, and it was very difficult. Sponsoring meant that they had to guarantee a job, housing, support, and it was difficult to find a place to go. The first place we ended up, it was in Palestine. Yes.
How old were you when you left?
I was not quite 6 years old. I didn't come to this country until I was in 7th grade, so. It's in the book. Palestine at the time was just in a bad situation. We lived in a refugee camp in Pakistan. Yeah.
I know you told me, but I forgot. Why are you called Ava? Why did you?
Well, my name is Gigi, but I felt in the context of the story, I felt that Ava was more appropriate. I just felt it went with the story. That's the only name that's not the original. Yeah. Yes.
Did
You mentioned that your family business, that is in Vienna,
In Vienna, my grandfather, they had a number of butcher stores.
but they were all the butchers.
Yeah.
I was curious.
They were in that business, his whole family, and my grandfather. Yes.
When's the movie coming out?
Please do.
Gigi's such a French name. I mean, mother comes from
Well, there's a book that came out way before the movie. And it's- Anybody else? I'll be first. Yes.
Are you in touch with anybody that came over? I know you were young, but your parents or anybody, or where they went?
They used to have what they called a Shanghai Ball. They had it in New York, they had it in California, and these people would get together. I think it was once a year, but in different places. And I went with my parents once or twice. But again, in the book, my mom died pretty young, and so I didn't do that. Yes.
Have you ever been back to Shanghai?
I've never been back because I knew I wanted to write the book and I wanted those images to be real. I didn't want to do this with it. And today I understand it's a fabulous city. And there is a memorial that they built as a reminder to the European Jews that lived there during this time. I think that's it for now.
Thank you from both of you for being here tonight, for supporting Gigi. Thank you, Gigi, for being here. And, okay, here is how the logistics are going to work. So